Oh, hey there. Oh, wait, I forgot some tools over here. And a whole block of wood I forgot about. Okay. Yeah. So, what are we going to talk about? Hey, howdy. Today we're going to talk about overcoming creative resistance. I will elaborate on what that means. And we will talk about, we will talk about the uncarved block, which you can see I have here. This is a block of wood. It's a yellow cedar block. Fairly nice, tight wood grain. You can see that, it's hard to see with the texture there. Here's a less textured surface. It's just a very tight grained wood, so there's not very much distance between rings or between the grains of the wood. So it just carves quite nicely. It carves quite cleanly. You can see here how easily this nice sharp knife slices through that thin layer along the corner. Or if I take a little gouge like this, how easily I can carve away a thin shaving like that. Now, the unblocked carver is a name I go by online, but the uncarved block is also a concept from Zen Buddhism. And I'm going to sharpen my tools here a little bit whilst I explain myself. Also, I'll show you a project that's beginning, kind of also an uncarved block, which is going to be a fire truck, little toy fire truck. Should be fun. But we'll put that aside for now. We've got wheels for it. We've got headlights, but save that for later. We've got a little steering wheel if I carve out the inside of the fire truck. We'll see about that. Now, I'm going to put something underneath here because I will be rubbing this polishing compound onto the strop, basically is what this is. And so once the polishing compound goes on there, you take your tool, and I might think a little bit now about which tool I'm likely to use for this project, but I might also step back even further. Maybe before I focus on sharpening my tools, because as you can see here, there's different tools for different tasks, right? So there's different types of carving edge shapes, and there's also a pack of Band-Aids that are kept in this box, which is a good thing to have when you're carving. But I mean, just don't cut yourself. The only time I cut myself while carving in my 6 or so years of carving very much was when I ate a DQ Blizzard a few minutes before sitting down to carve, and man, that thing put me in a halfway comatose state. And so I was using this particular tool right here. This is the one that cut me. I have a tiny little scar on this finger. You probably can't even see it, but you might be able to sort of see it. And it's right about there. And this is the tool that did it. And I was carving a little spoon. Picture this handle as a spoon, and I'm trying to get a little round part here on an inside curve, or I think I was pulling in like this, I was pulling towards myself, which, by the way, sometimes there's exceptions to the cliche rule about cutting away from yourself. But in this case, it was not an exception. And I was carving towards a knot or some stubborn grain. And I think something slipped, or the wood suddenly broke off, and boom! Next thing I know, my carving tool is slicing into that finger right there. Now, basically, I was not being alert or careful enough, and I wasn't in the right state of mind to be doing that part of the job. So that's where working with sharp tools and also working with a craft, reshaping something to your liking, mindfulness is a major component of the process going well. Not being hurried, but not being unfocused either. You have to be awake, but you don't have to hurry. So what I was going to say is that because I'm not necessarily sure which tools are going to be ideal to begin with for this project, we'll begin with taking a look at our block and just thinking a little bit about what it's going to become. So actually, I want to carve a little mask, and this may or may not be, well, I don't know. I don't know how this mask is going to look yet. You can see I drew a face on the piece a while ago, and then I carved it away partway. So here's a blank slate, and I guess I might start by just carving out some of the, I'll consider this the front of the face, I think. I will ask the wood grain what it thinks, but I think that could be the front, and then so I'll start by just carving out the back a little bit, just to start. Sometimes it's not about knowing exactly where it's going just yet. It's more so just finding a starting point and knowing where it is going in general. But I don't have to know exactly yet. One thing I could do is sort of just divide this out a little bit. So then there's like the halfway. Right, is that about halfway? That's pretty good. Whoa, Jesse knows how to eyeball. That's the halfway line. In the middle it gets a little wonky, but that's okay. Then we're gonna divide this into half as well, basically halfway, and then into thirds. Let's see. Just roughing out, like this is not at all the final shape of the mask, right? I'm just roughing out a little bit and then giving it some initial dimension. So a face tends to be, tends to have certain proportions, tends to have certain ratios. So you can see my halfway line, and then you can see that my mouth and my eyes are kind of halfway between the halfway. So in this case, this is smaller than my head, so let's just bring it forward like that. And we'll go, yeah, the mouth and the eyes are a little closer to the halfway line than they are to the top or bottom. But if you kind of divide the face from that extra top of the head there, it's pretty much halfway. So maybe that'll be the mask. Okay, so let's just kind of see how this looks if I draw a line like that, and a line like that. And then we imagine that's where there's a mouth. And we imagine eyes are just below that line. Something like that. I don't know, actually. Let's see. I think this center line actually needs to be lower. Boom, bottom of the nose. Boom, boom, boom. There's the chin. Those dimensions are kind of looking somewhat about right. So anyways, now I can just kind of get to some fun part, and part of removing resistance is making sure you never hit the block with too much in a way that creates too much resistance, right? So in this whole process, noticing all the things you're feeling, right? And I'm actually getting very hungry. My stomach is telling me not to do this for too long. So within 15 minutes from now, it'll be time to take a pause. But I am just going to take a couple of these tools here that are going to be good for gouging out a lot of wood. So here's some nice wide gouges, okay? And I'll start with this one here, nice and wide. And I'll sharpen it a little bit. So what I mean by that is that if I was to just obsess over making sure the final design was complete, or if I start to notice, like, okay, this part doesn't feel very interesting or exciting to me right now, you got to be careful how much time you spend in that zone before moving on to something that encourages you that, oh yeah, I actually enjoy this thing. This is my art. This isn't a chore. So when you're sharpening a carving tool, you must keep the angle very consistent. You don't want to come up at the end or something. That'll sort of dull your edge. You want to keep it nice sharp angle. Get that final edge polished. So the other thing about resistance is biting off the right amount for you to chew, so to speak. So when you take a sharp carving tool like this and you decide, I just want to take out a little scoop of wood here, look how little resistance there is, actual physical resistance, right? I don't even have a proper handle on this carving tool, pushing this little piece of metal against my skin. Put a proper handle on there. Boom. Okay, now it's not going to leave a dent in my palm, right? And now here's an exception to the carving toward yourself rule. Don't just go and try this. I know what I'm doing, okay? But look at this. Like there's not a lot of pressure, but boom, 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 boom. So because I'm taking off thin shavings with each pull, I really don't have to apply very much pressure at all. Look, this block isn't clamped down or anything. It's just gently pressing against my upper abdomen here. And I've already just scooped out a shallow little recess here. Probably hard to tell on screen exactly, but it's just thin shavings at a time. And you're met with very little resistance. Now, if I try to go really deep in one pull, it can be done. But you can see I applied more force. And eventually also, like, you try to go too deep. And, now the grain direction switch is meaning the angle of the tool, the thickness of the tool past the bevel is too thick to now change the angle quick enough to slice nicely without putting leverage on the sharp edge of the tool, which that's going to dull your tool. It might even bend it. So it's going to wreck your edge. Now I could go that deep from one angle and then hit it from the other angle kind of nicely. It's a pretty good way to take out deeper chunks. So you can do that. You can also go across the grain, which can be interesting because of how it lets you lever without actually bending or wrecking your edges as easily. You still wouldn't want to go too deep, and there's a lot of cases where going across the grain doesn't work out so well. Yo, I'm just rambling about creative resistance and carving a block. Uncarved block. What's up, Natalie? Did this show up? Did it just show up on your homepage on YouTube or what? I'm curious. I haven't had a lot of people jump in when I'm live streaming, but rambling about the steps you can take to get through creative work without resistance. So what I was just on about. Oh, cool. Well, I guess that means you're about to go to sleep. But I might leave this recording up. Anyways, we'll have to find time to have a chat soon anyways. But so understandable if you're taking off to go to sleep. But yeah, I thought I'd finally make a little mask out of this block. And so sharpening a gouge, taking my time, but pointing out that layer by layer, thin little shavings like that take very little pressure to cut through, and yet the block gets reshaped and eventually becomes something beautiful and marvelous that isn't just an uncarved block. Its potential is released. I wouldn't really say Chinese inspired per se, but I don't know. There's some like Oriental mask work that I'm fond of. There's a magician named Jeff McBride who he performs in Las Vegas, and he has a lot of Asia-inspired aesthetics in his show. Utilizes masks quite a bit. And I was just at that masquerade ball at the venue where the Creator Economy Convention is happening, and there was those masks. I don't know if those would be really an Oriental thing or not. Those like ones that kind of just go around your eyes mostly, the masquerade masks. Seems like that could be more of a European thing. I don't know. But I'm just roughing this out because I'm going to carve a mask on this side. And because I don't actually know what it's going to look like yet, the other thing I'm pointing out right now about creative resistance is that in many cases, you can start roughing things out before you know where it's going. And so, obviously, there's mental frameworks to avoid letting perfectionism cause inaction. Part of it is about keeping it fun. So I can do this part, which I like right now, and I don't really feel like finalizing a design right now. Partly because it's not even an inspiring shape right now. I don't want to draw on a 2D surface, so I'll start rounding out the front, and I'll start hollowing out the back, and then I'll start thinking about, okay, what kind of nose does this mask have? Because the nose is going to be, one of the furthest out parts. And then, what kind of cheekbones and chin and forehead does this guy have? And is it a masculine mask or a feminine mask, or either or? We got a leaf blower coming in the yard here, the landscapers, collecting all these sycamore leaves. I was away for 2 weeks, and the trees are now bare. I am longing to escape Canada and enjoy the desert. But what I was saying was that, I could get hung up on all these different parts of a thing. Oh, I'm going to spend all this time sharpening the wrong tools, maybe, or, anything to not just start, or because you get hung up on the wrong thing, where you meet with so much resistance, then you don't do the project at all, right? So this block's been sitting around, and I just have had resistance to getting started. And that's because there's all kinds of things that I'm busy with, but it's also not because of that. It's just because I simply haven't started. And so there's no momentum. In my mind, it feels like a bigger project than it actually is, or it feels like, oh, it has to be perfect, or I have to bring it all the way to completion. All of these things that stop starting from happening. So giving yourself permission to do some of the fun part, at least, and then you fluctuate, you go back and forth, right? So I'll rough out the hollowing of the back of this mask, I'll round out the front, and then I'll spend more time with a pencil and think about shapes, and I might even have some 2D sketches on paper, and come back to the 3D shape and sketch on the 3D shape. But see you later, Natalie. Sleep well, slap well. Talk to you soon. I'll continue talking into the void here for anyone who might be listening to the recording later on, if I let this upload. But yeah, just starting by roughing it out, right? That's all you can do. You can't improve something that doesn't exist, right? So letting it exist first, then improving it. That's good. I'm just gonna point that down for now, get my ugly face out of this ordeal. I'm a faceless channel now. Now pretty soon I'm gonna have to get going to hydrate and eat food. But there will be more of these videos, and this uncarved block will become a mask over this series of live streams. And also, I guess part of my resistance to beginning this has been that I thought, I need to record a series of videos while I do it. And of course, they have to be polished. They have to be perfect. I can't just start. What if I ramble on too much and I don't make clear points about how to overcome creative resistance, and then, the one person who tunes in leaves? Oh, or I wasn't even thinking live streams. I was thinking recorded videos. Then I thought, well, if I ramble on too much and I don't have clear scripts, then I'm going to have to do a lot of editing. So suddenly carving this darn mask turns into this monumental task, which is absurd. It's ridiculous. Why can't I just start, right? Oh, I don't want to start the project when the camera's not rolling, because then people miss part of the process, and I miss the opportunity to talk about that part of the process, about roughing out the beginning or about sharpening your tools and all these metaphors I want to go into about removing creative resistance and slicing away the right amount at a time. So because of that lofty ideal of perfectionism in my head, I've let it go on for about a month of, oh yeah, I think I'll make that series of videos at some point. So today, it struck me. I should just go on a live stream and do it, because you know what? It's not going to be perfect. And if I do want to one day produce the series of recorded videos that I have idealized in my head as this wonderful course on overcoming creative resistance, then I better just start by starting. Otherwise, other things will always take precedence, and I won't actually gain the data or the skill set that would at some point make it easier to create something closer to that ideal vision that I've had. But the other thing is, you'll surprise yourself when you finally get out of your own way and you're not meeting so much resistance and you're just in action. You're moving and you're creating. Suddenly, there's a higher power that comes through. There's a higher creative skill set that's beyond what you knew you had. There's some force of connective tissue that somehow plays this role in bringing order and beauty to what you're doing. And it ends up being closer to the vision of perfection, or different and better than your vision of perfection than you could have imagined. So being in action is a big part of creative progress. You know, there's contemplation and thinking things through and studying and gaining a skill, but really, life happens in the arena. And so starting is usually a good call. Starting is usually a good call. Now you're saying I'm going to go across the grain here for a little bit, and you'll kind of maybe get a feel for the effect that that's having a little bit. I'm sure that some of the sound and the things you can see my hands doing gives you some sense of the different pressures at work, and some of the sounds of how the wood separates, whether it slices nicely or sort of chips. And so try to listen to that while I carve across the grain here. That's working out quite nicely. So you can sort of see some of how the wood responds to that. Across the grain with such a soft, tight-grained cedar like this works pretty nicely. With a lot of harder woods, you'd be just splitting and cracking, and it would be splintery and not working out very nice. Still going with the grain has its function, but in this case, they're sort of interchangeable for this stage of the game. Going across the grain, there is a little bit of tearing if you look close. Like it's kind of hard to see on camera, but you can see that there is tearing going on, whereas when you go with the grain, generally it's going to be smoother. I'm not being careful at all right now, right? So there's plenty of tearing, but generally with the grain is how you're going to get that those nice smooth cuts. So you can also sort of go, in this case, diagonally, where you're going with the grain, but you're also sort of chopping across. And the only way to really understand what I'm saying is to go find a block of wood and and get a carving gouge. But the metaphors apply. So maybe you're not a carver, maybe you are a drawer or a painter or a musician. It applies to your psyche, right? So when you're carving with the grain, you're doing something that is utilizing the pre-existing direction of nature to accomplish a lot with very little force. And when you're carving or cutting across the grain, you're engaging in an act that forcefully restructures reality much more aggressively, and can sometimes, cut through and create a change in the direction that nature's grain is going in, or how it responds. So that across the grain action in your psyche is what takes a lot of willpower and force, and then maybe even changes the direction of the flow of of nature, of energy. And it costs more energy to do so. So you want to do that quite strategically. But being strategic also means often just going with the grain. And so carving a block of wood is a nice, cool set of metaphors for resistance and how to engage with life in a way that is low resistance, or to utilize resistance at times, right? So an example of that would be how you have more control over a tool sometimes when you're pushing it in two directions at the same time. So sometimes you might see someone carving something, I don't know, like this, where this hand is pushing the tool and this hand is creating resistance, but it's guiding. So it's like that. And it can be very controlled, right? Where if I was just trying to push like that, less controlled. Anyways, just fucking around, just having fun. So hollowing out a block of wood, and what's going to happen is next time I now approach this block of wood, it'll be less resistance in my psyche to getting started again, because I'll see it and see, oh, look at all that progress that was made. Now there's more fun parts coming. It's becoming more interesting to do the more challenging parts, but there's still, always like easier parts that I can go to if I feel like it. So even though maybe this is just a little 30-minute session working on this project, and that maybe it seems like not much got accomplished, the final design still completely unknown, all I did was rough out like the first centimeter deep recess in the back, so might feel like not much got done. But actually what happened, it's like planting a seed. It's like an exponential sort of thing, right? You got to realize starting is the thing that it dissolves all the initial resistance. I guess there has to be something even before starting. And we'll get to that. And we sort of did get to that, right? I started by just putting the block here, running the live stream, having the mental breakthrough. Oh, I don't have to film these perfect videos. So it starts off with those little mental breakthroughs, which can start off with contemplation. Maybe writing. Writing is something that's kind of that in between. It's contemplative and it's action oriented. So writing, journaling is a great tool to find out which direction do I want to go here, and what's going to excite me enough to get started. Anyways, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. I'm getting very, very hungry, so I'll have to go start cooking a meal. But this is going to be fun, this little live stream series. So if you watched this, thanks. Let me know. Let me know that you watched it, because I have no idea if it would be of interest for someone to tune into this nonsense. We'll go deeper on Tao and Zen, and we'll go deeper on woodcarving, and we'll go deeper on depth psychology and individuation of your psyche, and how to transform your identity. But also, that's all for now. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see what happens with this little series. I think it's a series. I have lots of podcast guests coming up, and there's lots to do for the Living Internet Alliance and the Creator Economy Convention, and exciting things, very exciting things. So stay tuned. Check out the other videos. Check out the podcasts. Just did one with Dennis McKenna, brother of Terence McKenna, the person who thought of the stoned ape theory. Psilocybin mushrooms playing a role in the evolution of the human brain. Very fascinating stuff. Anyways, goodbye.